Hello again, rail fans. You know, local freight trains are akin to the delivery trucks that Amazon uses to bring the stuff you've ordered right to your doorstep, the last mile of the long trip from the manufacturer to the receiver. Here in the Tampa area, there's only one common carrier railroad, and that is CSX. So industries that use heavy raw materials or machinery rely on the railroad to bring them that stuff and to ship out their finished products. And surprisingly, even with all of the growth that's happening here in the Tampa area, heavy industries still thrive and rely on the railroads for getting their products and shipping their stuff out. And it makes for some pretty good train watching without a lot of driving.
Everything that comes to Tampa by rail must come through CSX's Yeoman Yard. It's the old Seaboard Airline Yard, built in 1950, several miles to the east of downtown Tampa. By coincidence or design, it's at this place where the SAL main into downtown Tampa comes within about 1,300 feet of Atlantic Coastline's main into downtown Tampa. ACL also had a yard and shops here called UCETA, which is still in operation. When the merger came in 1967, the two fortuitously built yards simply merged operations without having to move. And today, it's still where most of the freight cars for the area's rail customers arrive and depart. Train 0701 is arriving at Yeoman early on a Thursday morning around 9 o'clock. 701 goes on duty in Clearwater across Tampa Bay. There, he leaves to switch customers in St. Petersburg and Largo. He picks up their empties and brings them over here to Yeoman, where they'll go out in regular freight service to Waycross. This morning, 701 is bringing in empties, except for those 7 gondolas loaded with old cross ties. Apparently, there's been a tie replacement operation on the Clearwater subdivision. On the bottom are all empty rock hoppers out of Conrad Yelvington's distribution terminal in Largo. Yelvington is probably the largest rail customer in Pinellas County, where Clearwater and St. Petersburg are. Right here is the only double-track territory left in Tampa. The track in the foreground is a freight lead. Track in the middle is the West Main, and the far track is the East Main. And they're not actually main lines. They're yard leads under the control of the Yeoman Yardmaster. That far track becomes the Hooker's Point lead to Tampa's main port area, and that's where we're going next. At 0925, we move about a mile away to 26th Street on the Hooker's Point spur. Roadway forces have been working here, ripping out an industrial spur that served warehouses in this area for decades. Those warehouses have also been removed and replaced with a vertical storage building and a giant IKEA, neither of which have any need for rail service. At the 26th Street crossing, we're just in time for Y193, the daily yard job to Hooker's. Here's another single GP40-2 pulling a string of miscellaneous loads of commodities for export. The tank cars carry various chemicals. The covered hoppers are mostly phosphate loads. On the bottom are 3 long tanks of liquefied petroleum gas, propane. The road crossing structure is a study in changing trends. 10 years ago, CSX changed many of its road crossing from the rubber buffers to creosote timbers, a design from the old days. But they seem to be changing them back to rubber. Some crossings got concrete panels, but here at 26th Street, they've removed the concrete panels and replaced them with the rubber spacers. This is all Seaboard Airline territory through here. I believe SAL had all the lines on Hooker's Point. Also, right here, we're about 1,500 feet away from the site of Seaboard's Gary shops, which were demolished decades ago, and a transflow terminal built on the site. I got word that 0700 was leaving Yeoman and heading to Drew to do some work. Drew is about midway to Clearwater along the Clearwater sub. It's where all of the area's cars and trucks come in by rail and are offloaded for dealerships. 0700 today is a GP38-3 running engine light. I'm shooting from the 7th Avenue crossing. Again here, he's on the SAL main from Tampa to Clearwater, the Clearwater sub. And even though he's moving north according to the compass, he's moving south on the railroad. The Clearwater sub is timetabled from Tampa to St. Petersburg as southbound, but from Tampa up to Sulphur Springs is compass north. This deviance from logic drove me crazy the first few years I was railfanning here until I figured out what the railroad had done and why. Right alongside here is a building that once housed a thriving business that needed its own rail spur and a boxcar-high loading dock. Now it's a warehouse for a donation charity. No rail service needed. The spur has been cut out of the main line. We moved north on the Clearwater sub several miles to Sulphur Springs. This is the junction with the Brooksville sub that runs about 15 miles up to Brooksville. Sulphur Springs was once its own town. Where the chain link fence is now, once stood the Sulphur Springs Seaboard Passenger Depot. Fortunately, the structure was preserved and is on display at Heritage Village Park in Largo. Some artifacts remain here. 2 DTC block signs still stand. Before CSX switched to the track warrant system, it used manual blocks in its unsignaled territories. When a train got track authority, it got the whole block, usually all by itself. These signs were the field markers of where the blocks began and ended. Technically, this is Sulphur Springs Yard, but that consists of a single track that's pretty much a siding. Since the Clearwater sub continues off to the left, the junction switch stays in reverse position, and an interlock dwarf signal shows a green aspect for this alignment. This is a spring switch that allows trail-through movements without lining the switch. 12:23 as we look down the hill from Sulphur Springs to the through truss bridge over the Hillsborough River, 0701 comes into view. This is the first job we saw earlier this morning. He's dropped his empties in Yeoman Yard and is now coming back with loaded rock hoppers for Conrad Yelvington in Largo, using that single GP40-2 to haul those loaded rock cars up the hill from the river. Makes the turn west towards Drew and Clearwater. One word of caution here at Sulphur Springs. There is a sizable hobo jungle here in the woods just east of the tracks. I walk down here alone, but I will not do that again. By now it was lunchtime, and since I was already up here on Bush Boulevard, I drove east, past Bush Gardens, and into Mel's Hot Dogs. Mel's has been a Tampa landmark for decades. He uses only Vienna beef wieners and makes them Chicago style. I say, without exaggeration, this is the cleanest restaurant I think I've ever been in. Every minute it seems like someone is sweeping, wiping down tables. It's clean. I got a chili dog to go. Now, chili dogs don't look all that great when you unwrap them, but Mel's are fantastic. Mel has great fries, too. The chili dog, fries, and unsweet tea were $10.49. You can't miss Mel's Hot Dogs on Bush Boulevard. Just look for the Wienermobile out front. One of the staples for Tampa train watching is the Port Tampa Switcher, Y295. He makes the 11-mile trip from Yeoman Yard to Port Tampa and back 5 nights a week, Sunday through Thursday. The first highlight of the Y295 job is the street running through downtown. Street running is what rail fans call it when railroad tracks are buried in street pavement and run parallel to the road traffic. It still exists, but railroads don't like it, and cities don't like it, so street running is becoming a rarity. This piece of street running is part of the ex-Atlantic Coastline, Maine, from Richmond, Virginia to Port Tampa, Florida. Even though it was downgraded to an industrial spur decades ago, mileposts on this segment still carry the A prefix of the A line. The crossing signals through downtown Tampa are non-standard. They're mounted on the traffic signal masts, and there are no gates. Plus, there are apparently no approach circuits in the tracks, so each crossing must be activated by radio from the locomotive cab, the engineer sending out a specific DTMF code for each crossing. The other highlight of this line is the Hillsborough River Drawbridge. Built in 1915 for the Atlantic coastline by the Scherzer Rolling Lift Bridge Company out of Chicago. It's been in service ever since. This bridge is about the last piece of heavy industry on a riverfront that used to be all heavy industry. Totally cleaned up now and gentrified, the Hillsborough River is home to rowing crews and dragon boat teams, restaurants, bars, pontoon boats. The minarets of Henry Plant's Tampa Bay Hotel are now the sentinels of the University of Tampa. There's no bridge tender here anymore. CSX has put most of its drawbridges under remote control. This one is operated by the bridge tender at the Alafia River on the Palmetto subdivision from Tampa to Bradenton. The train crew calls Alafia on the road channel when they're getting close. He lowers the bridge and lets the crew know when it's ready. The 107-year-old structure takes a little over 4 minutes to go from fully upright to down and locked. The deck below the drawspan is so low that only the smallest boats can get under when it's down. The week I was shooting this train, the preferred power seemed to be a GP38-3. Y-295 carries mostly tank car and boxcar traffic these days. Because all 8.5 miles of the Port Tampa Spur is accepted track, the speed limit is 15 miles an hour, and that makes it easy to leapfrog the train even with Tampa's heavy rush hour traffic. I made it down to the Rattlesnake Spur in time to see him start backing in and got a surprise when he rounded the turn. I knew something was up when I saw him backing up, but heard no backup commands on the radio. Y-295 is apparently now a remote control job. It appears to be in the shakedown period now with several crew members on the train, but RC operations are intended to be done with just one person, so I'm guessing this will be a one-man job soon. Down near the customers on Rattlesnake Point, I set up 2 evenings later as Y-295 backed in. This is another area that's gentrifying fast with million-dollar condos. Not a very inviting name. I'm sure they'll soon change it from Rattlesnake to Eagles Trace Preserve and Ranch or some such. For now, though, these 2 industrial customers are still getting rail cars. First, Y-295 works the Cargill Sweetener Terminal. Tank cars full of corn syrup, polyol, or other food sweetening products. I guess that's why none of these cars has hazmat placards. Peering through Cargill's gate, you can see there's an active concrete plant right next door. This company makes concrete that goes into making the pilings and piers for the new 6.5-mile-long Howard Franklin Bridge that carries I-275 over Tampa Bay. Now, for some reason, this concrete plant is not rail-served, even though there are rails about 25 feet away, the same lead that goes into Cargill sweeteners. Switching out the empties and loaded tank cars takes multiple ups and backs here. Cargill has 2 500-foot tracks, and that makes the switching a lot easier. When they finish, they pull out to customer number 2, chemical formulators. They also have 2 tracks about 600 feet each, and the Y-295 crew will make the same kind of ups and backs here, most of it by remote control.
I mentioned the gentrification going on here. Right next door to these industries are 2 really good waterfront restaurants, Hula Bay and Salt Shack. It's just the way things are going here in coastal Florida. Now put your comments in the comments section down below. I read them all. I love to get them from places far and wide. Please hit the like button if you like the video, and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done that. And let's plan to meet up again soon, somewhere out there on the high iron. And until we do, this is Danny Harmon, out.